I welcome this opportunity to speak to the people of America about a subject which I believe to be most important, and that is the subject of physical fitness. This should be a matter of concern to us all. A country is as strong, really, as its citizens. And I think that mental and physical health, mental and physical vigor go hand in hand.
This is what most Americans innocently put into their bodies these days, and most alarmingly, into the bodies of their children.
In a million years, I would not take the flu shot.
But they're really criticizing science.
Or first they're going to vaccinate you, then they're going to take your guns and Bibles away, and as ridiculous as that sounds to us, a quarter of the nation believed it.
Who would think that the American healthcare system and our government agencies would be clamoring to fix metabolic health?
Good things have come out about the hydroxy. A lot of good things have come out.
Very quickly in my research on ivermectin, I had no idea that there was 10 years, since 2012, 10 years of in vitro studies showing that ivermectin inhibits the replication of at least a dozen viruses, RNA viruses.
Ivermectin is a remarkable drug. If you had to design a drug for COVID, it would look exactly like ivermectin.
Hi, welcome to Doses of Deception. I am your host, Bibi McGuire. As a seasoned nurse with more than 3 decades of experience, we will discuss various topics, exposing deception and empowering you with information and knowledge to foster critical thinking. This show is for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide medical advice. Please consult your trusted healthcare provider. Okay, now we got the legalese out of the way. So again, my name is Bibi McGuire, and welcome to my very first episode of Doses of Deception. So I just want to give you a little bit of background of who I am, where I come from, and what we're going to talk about today. I started in the medical profession in July of 1989 and got my nursing degree shortly thereafter. I started in my formative years at a level 1 trauma center outside Washington, D.C. And now I'm going to put my glasses on. It's going to make my sister crazy because they have a glare, but I don't have the non-glare glasses yet. So we're just going to have some glare. Anyway, so I was trained by a really collaborative team. We did really good medicine. And I felt so proud of the profession that I had chosen. We were completely focused on our patients, not on corporate quarterly goals. And I got to work with some amazing professionals. One of the surgeons that I currently work with, I worked with more than 30 years ago at the trauma center. And the Texas Heart Institute journal published a study it was a case study that Dr. Schimpf was a part of, where the patient had experienced blunt chest trauma and had a ruptured aorta, which is the largest artery in your body, and how they were able to successfully put that back together and save that person's life. And this is just one example of so many. Just amazing stories of just amazing, really good medicine. More than 30 years later, he and I are still working together. So pretty cool. I remember the very first encounter I had with a pharmaceutical rep. I was a brand new nurse, and we were told that the pharmacy company, the reps, were going to host a luncheon for the nurses. Okay, so I go into the lounge. Again, I'm a brand new nurse. I go in the lounge, and there's this spread of food for this luncheon, and all these marketing trinkets, like little things, name tag things to put on your stethoscope, and scissors and notepads, and just a bunch of crap. We had to sit through their little in-service about some antibiotic while I was eating my lunch, and I had to sign the little form. And I remember asking them, why are you in-servicing a bunch of nurses who can't write prescriptions for antibiotics? They said we had a lot of influence over the physicians, and that's why they were doing it. My answer to the rep, again, more than 30 years ago, pretty prescient to what we see being revealed all around us today. And that was this. Well, I don't know how much you spent on all of this for nurses who can't write prescriptions, but perhaps if you lowered the cost of your medications, 90% of the patients that I have out here on stretchers on oxygen in congestive heart failure, might be able to afford their blood pressure medicines. Hasn't changed a lot, has it? So after working there, I did 10 years of local travel. So I kind of traveled around all the hospitals in the Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland corridor. So I got to work a lot of different health systems. So it gave me, a really broad viewpoint of healthcare. I worked as an expert witness in several malpractice cases. I taught advanced cardiac life support for more than a decade to doctors, nurses, paramedics, respiratory therapists. I helped to train student nurses as well as new graduate nurses. For the past 13 years, I've been working in what we call perioperative arena, which peri meaning around, operative the OR. I work in pre-op, which is where you would come in and have your IV put in and do your paperwork, get your pre-op antibiotics before you go into the operating room. I also work in PACU, which is the post-anesthesia care unit or recovery room, which is where you would wake up and be discharged after you have your surgical procedure. Most of the cases that we do, or for the past 13 years I've been doing, is all elective, which are cases that are not acute, and mostly in the hospitals and freestanding surgical centers. With RFK, now Health and Human Services Secretary, the MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again, is really taking off. And we clearly see that we are a nation suffering with overwhelming chronic illness. And in evaluating my career, I never worked on the front end, so you would go into your primary care doctor's office with a list of symptoms or ailments, and primarily your doctor's going to hand you a prescription for a pharmaceutical medication to manage your symptoms. Where I work now is kind of that intermediate phase where maybe the pharmaceutical agent isn't managing your symptoms well, or your symptoms are progressing, your ailment is progressing, your illness is progressing, and now you're on to the next intervention, which sometimes is surgical. And then the first part of my career, I was at the end point where these chronic conditions have now gotten to the end point. Your high blood pressure and heart disease is now resulting in cardiac arrest or congestive heart failure. Your kidney disease has now got you in, renal failure, and 1,000 others. So I offer to you an opportunity to journey with me. I want to examine different topics and countering those doses of deception that we've been given with skepticism and critically thinking through information. I'm not an expert. I'm only experienced. And I'm not a physician. I'm not going to talk to you at biomolecular levels. I'm a nurse. And for more than 30 years as a nurse, I have been a patient advocate. I advocate for the well-being and the best outcomes for the patients. And that's what I want to do for you. I'm also an interpreter. The doctor comes in and he blah, 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 at you in Dr. Ease, and you didn't understand a word he said. And then you look at me and I say, what he's saying is this. So I kind of want to go through things and do that with you. I'm on a journey of learning myself. I woke up during COVID, and the overwhelming, almost instantaneous feeling like, oh my God, what else have they lied to us about, is what prompted my journey of going and digging, looking for the deception and countering it with truth. I encourage your skepticism of me. Question everything I present. Do your own research. Stop allowing some expert class to dictate to you your understanding. I'm going to try to help the best I can and share with you what I'm learning, but there's probably more information out there. In fact, I know there is. So go get it. Go create your own understanding of what's happening around you. I'm just like you. I'm going to turn this little heater on because it's chilly. I'm married. I have 2 children who are grown now, and both are nurses. I have grandchildren. I work full time. On the weekends, I do laundry and clean the house and go grocery shopping. So I'm trying to balance this insanity just like you. What I'd like to do is spend my day off trying to walk through some of this insanity with you, and let's try to make some sense of it, and let's start thinking through things. At this point, I do want to express my sincerest gratitude to Badlands Media, particularly Ash and Abby. They invited me on the 3rd episode of their show, Alphas Make Sandwiches, and it inspired me and encouraged me to keep going. They were wonderful. I am eternally grateful to Absolute 1776. He made the intro video to the show. It was amazing. He's a wizard. You can also find him on Badlands Media on shows like Eye of the Storm and Culture of Change and several others. Ash and Abs are my IT support team. And guys, I couldn't have done it without you. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Thank you. Last, but certainly not least, I need to express my sincerest thanks to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for all the lessons and all the blessings and all the grace, all the gifts. This is because he woke me up, and all the glory to him. So this I want to give credit to Abby for. She posted this over on X, and man, it nailed me. Your first workout will be bad. Your first podcast will be bad. So I'm not gonna do this, smoothly and perfectly. Your first speech will be bad. Your first video will be bad. Your first anything will be bad. But you can't make your 100th without making your first. So right now, I'm going to put my ego aside, and we're going to get started. So like I was saying, I woke up during COVID, like a lot of people did. I mean, COVID really woke us all up, didn't it? Oh, do you like my mug? It's my favorite mug. And for more than 30 years, I had been trained to critically think, right? yet I was still brainwashed by this allopathic medicine model. So, allopathic medicine is based on the use of pharmacological agents or physical interventions to suppress symptoms of disease. Interestingly, in Greek, allos means other, and pathos means suffering. Other suffering. So I never questioned the experts either. You know, the FDA, the CDC, the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Heart Association, on and on ad nauseum. I never questioned them. I trusted them. I no longer do. So, like I described, I'm working in the front lines in the ERs, and I had to actually go look this up because what I remember was that, wait a minute, I've worked all these pandemics and disease outbreaks. I've never seen this kind of craziness. So I went back and looked, and it was HIV/AIDS, SARS-1, because COVID was actually SARS-2, H1N1 flu, MERS, Ebola, and Zika. Never in any of those did I see the public health hysteria that we experienced during COVID. I was scared because having worked through all of those pandemics on the front line and never seeing anything like we saw, when they started shutting stuff down, kids couldn't go to school. I'm working outpatient surgery, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm sitting at home on unemployment because they shut down all elective surgeries in outpatient centers and at the hospitals and reallocated resources for inpatient critical patient care. So my thought was, what in the hell kind of virus is this that they're shutting everything down? I mean, I've worked through HIV/AIDS and SARS and H1N1, and we never did this. What the hell is this? So I'm wiping down my groceries like everybody else. My husband and I are literally having arguments over cardboard pizza delivery boxes because you can't wipe down cardboard and it might live on the cardboard. It was insanity. So thinking about this first episode, I really kind of wanted to do a sweeping overview of what I believe is the groundwork that was laid for what we're experiencing and what is being exposed today. This was a journey to try to understand for myself. So I'm just going to share some of the things that I've learned and kind of maybe tie a few of those into current events. So in 1976, we were celebrating the bicentennial. I was 10 years old. What was going on in the 1970s? So financially, 1973, we saw the collapse of the Bretton Woods Agreement. This was an international monetary fund framework that got established in 1944 to govern post-World War II financial relations among countries. It was named after Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, where it was located. And that's where 44 allied nations met to stabilize the global economy by having fixed exchange rates with currencies that were pegged to the US dollar on a gold standard fixed at $35 an ounce. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank were established here. By the 1960s, the US was already facing some deficits leading to outflow of dollars, and this was starting to exceed the gold reserve. Other countries started accumulating dollars and tried to convert to gold. The reserves dwindled. The Vietnam War expenditures then widened the trade deficit, undermining confidence in the US dollar. So in 1971, speculators began to doubt the US's ability to maintain the gold peg, which was leading to runs on the dollar. In August, President Nixon unpegged the dollar from gold, and that was known as Nixon shock, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system of fixed rates. Our money became fiat currency, its value coming from the faith and credit of the US government, not any tangible backing. So simply, our money's value rests on the confidence in the United States economy and government. So how much confidence do you have in that today? Okay. Yeah, not. Increasingly, regulatory laws under OSHA, which was established in 1970, the Consumer Protection Safety Act, which was in 1972, and the Fair Labor Act increased costs and slowed productivity. U.S. manufacturers were facing increasing competition from countries that had fewer regulations. This is why the Trump administration is really focused on reducing regulations to bring manufacturing back into the United States. In 1974, the Congress passed the Impoundment Control Act. Apparently, Nixon was impounding funds that were appropriated by Congress for programs that he didn't really like very much. So Congress significantly limited executive power through that act. In February of this year, legislation was introduced to repeal that act, citing the authority of the president to exercise fiscal restraint, the executive branch to oversee and check the runaway spending by Congress, the legislative branch. Remember that? The whole checks and balances system of our government? Yeah. We need to review that maybe as a nation. So, 1973, the Yom Kippur War, or the Arab-Israeli War, broke out in October. Primarily, it was Egypt and Syria against Israel. So on October 17th, OPEC, which is the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, announced an oil embargo against countries that were supporting Israel, which was primarily us, the US. Oil prices quadrupled, shortages occurred. I remember, and inflation. But I remember being a kid, being in my mom's old blue Chevy, and sitting in gas lines. And I can't remember all the exact things, but I remember it was based on the tag number and either the letter or the number. I think it was the letter. And based on your tag, your license plate number, you were either a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or you were a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. It was bizarre, but I do remember waiting in horrible gas lines in the 70s. So the embargo was actually lifted in March of 1974. Then we had June of 1972, burglars broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel. By August of 1974, Nixon had resigned. The Arab-Israeli War was preceded by the 1972 Munich Olympics attack. Terrorists who were believed to have been Palestinian broke into the Israeli athletes' quarters and took 11 hostages. Ultimately, all 11 hostages were killed, and 5 of the 8 terrorists were also killed. The very first Earth Day was April 22nd, 1970, and that was to raise awareness of environmental issues. The EPA was established in 1970. The Clean Air Act became law in 1970, and the Clean Water Act followed in 1972. Both of those acts imposed stricter controls on emissions, and manufacturers had to install pollution control measures. And then on April 4th, 1975, Bill Gates and Paul Allen founded Microsoft. Ooh. Then we move into how the 70s changed for us women. So I have a video that just perfectly depicts it. Ready?
'Cause I'm a woman. I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never let you forget you're a man.
Give her Enjoli, the 8-hour perfume for that 24-hour woman.
I can work till 5 o'clock, come home and read you tickety-tock.
Tonight I'm gonna cook for the kids.
And if it's loving you one, I can kiss you and give you the shiver and fit.
Enjoli, the 8-hour perfume for your 24-hour woman.
Oh, good grief. Yes, I can bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan. I'm a woman. Yeah. So in 1966, the National Organization for Women was founded after Betty Friedman wrote her book titled The Feminine Mystique. And it was all about dissatisfied housewives. So in 1972, Gloria Steinem co-founded Ms. Magazine, the very first national magazine dedicated to the women's lib movement. She also served on the board for the National Organization for Women. Oh, yeah, and then the pill hit. Ooh. So the pill had profound effects. Women in the workforce increased, divorce rates increased, family size decreased. Historically, Margaret Sanger and Catherine McCormick were the mothers of the pill. They believed that contraception was a precondition of the emancipation of women. McCormick had a biology degree and worked as a nurse in New York. Sanger worked as an obstetrics nurse. They were both nurses. McCormick's money provided the financial backing for research resulting in the pill. And together, Sanger's activism and McCormick's money were fundamental in establishing and expanding Planned Parenthood. Let's do a little video in the background of one Miss Margaret Sanger. She's a very, very, very interesting person.
The great feminist who founded Planned Parenthood is pointed out in the Washington Times by Irina Grossu. She shaped the eugenics movement in America and beyond in the 30s and 40s. Her views and those of her peers in the movement contributed to compulsory sterilization laws in 30 U.S. states that resulted in more than 60,000 sterilizations of vulnerable people, including people she considered, quote, feeble-minded idiots and morons, unquote. She even presented a Ku Klux Klan rally in 1926, spoke to them. In Silver Lake, New Jersey, she recounted this event in her autobiography. She said, I accepted an invitation to talk to the women's branch of the Klan. I saw through the door dim figures parading with banners and illuminated crosses. I was escorted to the platform, was introduced, and began to speak. And in the end, through simple illustrations, I believed I had accomplished my purpose. A dozen invitations to speak to similar groups were proffered. In a letter to Clarence Gable in 1939, Sanger wrote, we do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. 1939. Her own words in television appearances leave no room for parsing. She wrote many articles about eugenics in the journal she founded in 1917, the Birth Control Review. Her articles included Some Moral Aspects of Eugenics, June of 1920, The Eugenic Conscience, February 1921, The Purpose of Eugenics, December 1924, Birth Control and Positive Eugenics, July 1925, Birth Control, The True Eugenics, August 1920, how the Democrat Party and the radical left runs with it. 79% of Planned Parenthood's abortion activity takes place in minority neighborhoods, mostly black neighborhoods. This is the history of that organization. This is the history of the radical abortion movement. This is the history.
Margaret Sanger was a member of the American Eugenics Society. Eugenics refers to the practice or science of improved human population through controlled breeding. We could do an entire episode on eugenics. So we'll move on to Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court in 1973 ruled 7-2, legalizing abortion. According to Grok AI, by 2024, this is astounding, 65,464,760 unborn have been aborted. So in 1976, the first Ebola outbreak occurred in Zaire. I was very shocked by that one. I had no idea that Ebola had been around that long. When I was doing travel nursing, when I told you I was going from hospital to hospital in the Washington, D.C. area, I was on every Ebola response team at every hospital I ever worked at. And it was insane. I mean, we had to dress in the whole biohazard. Oh, it was horrible. On November 18th, 1978, over 900 followers, including 300 children of Jim Jones, drank cyanide to commit revolutionary suicide. Man, the 70s were a mess. So now we're going to move on to education. So in 1971, the Supreme Court case, Swan versus Charlotte Mecklenburg Board of Education, upheld busing as a legitimate way to achieve desegregation, which was originally ruled in 1954 in Brown versus the Board of Education, that declared segregated schools unconstitutional. And when I was in second grade, I was bused as a result of this. And so I was going to the school in my community, and it was a school of mostly white kids. And I had to it was the middle of the year, I remember, and I had to get on a different bus and go across town. And I was in a school with mostly black kids. So they took some black kids and put them to the white school, and took some white kids and took them to the black school. And, we were just kids. We were second grade. We were just, little girls on the playground, noticing that, man, your hair is different than mine. Can I play with your hair? We learned how to do each other's hair, and we learned how to double Dutch jump rope. And it was just normal for us. I don't know. That was my experience with being bused. We also saw the open education movement, which was weird. No classrooms, no class lessons, no standardized testing. I experienced this in sixth grade. So when I started middle school in sixth grade, I went to a brand new school, and it was built on this open education model, and there were no walls in the school. It was wide open. My classroom would have been separated from your classroom with these little flimsy partitions that didn't even go to the ceiling. And so what I remember about it was that it was just loud, and it seemed chaotic. Because when I went to high school and there were actual classrooms, I really liked that. By 1980, it had faded, and the U.S. Department of Education was created in 1979 at the urging of Jimmy Carter, and became operational in 1980. So Carter received the very first ever endorsement from the largest teachers union after pledging his support for the establishment of the Department of Education. So this is the trends in public schooling since 1979. The total cost is the full cost of K through 12 education of a single student graduating in a given year, adjusted for inflation. In 1970, it was $57,602. In 2010, $164,426. And what I also found interesting was, look at that yellow line of employees. I mean, down at the bottom, you have math, reading, and science scores, and they are flat all the way across. In fact, the science scores dropping below. Yet the total cost and the number of employees steadily increasing since inception. Pretty amazing. The 1980 budget for the Department of Education was between $10 and $14 million, depending on the source you look at. I saw anywhere between those two numbers. In 2024, sorry about that. I'm clicking because I'm technically, disadvantaged. In 2024, the budget was $268 billion. So I'm going to repeat that. The 1980 budget for the Department of Education was between 10 and 14 million. In 2024, $268 billion. And we have flat lines in math, reading, and science. The agency has over 4,000 employees with an average salary. Get this. This is a ton more money than I'm making with 30 years experience nursing. An average salary of $140,000. The NEA reports the average teacher salary, $71,000. Something is really wrong with that picture. So Ronald Reagan had a few ideas about the Department of Education.
I propose, and would have already started, if your hypothesis is correct, a planned and orderly transfer back to the states and local communities of functions the federal government has usurped and which it has proven it is incapable of operating. And one of the first of those would be welfare. One of the second would be in the field of education. I would like to dissolve the $10 billion National Department of Education created by President Carter and turn schools back to the local school districts where we built the greatest public school system the world has ever seen. I think I can make a case that the decline in the quality of public education began when federal aid became federal interference.
So has this huge investment of our hard-earned tax dollars translated into the improved learning for our children?
President Trump is not failing America's children. He is saving America's children with this action that he will take later today, directing Linda McMahon, our great Secretary of Education, to dismantle this federal bureaucracy that has taken more than $3 trillion from the American taxpayer since its inception in 1979. And what have we had as a result of that investment in our children's education? Declining test scores in reading, writing, and math. Proficiency levels at record lows for 8th graders, for 4th graders, at every level in every state across this country. That's why the president is returning education back to the people, to those closest to our students in our classrooms, and that is teachers and educators and parents who know what is best for their children. And we are excited about this event that will be here later in the afternoon at the White House. We will have parents and educators and students and also governors from across the country who are excited to embrace this new responsibility of educating our nation's children. I will add one more point. The Department of Education has never educated a child. All it has ever done is stolen money from the taxpayers for more regulation that has hurt our children's education. And it's about time a president does something about it. And thank God President Trump is.
So let me just add this up here. So just recently, President Trump is following through on Reagan's vision of eliminating federal interference and returning the education of our children back to the states and local communities where it was the most successful. This is a phenomenal executive order. If you're ever interested in reading the executive orders as they get put out, if you go to whitehouse.gov and you go to executive actions, you can download and read the executive orders in full. So now I kind of want to shift to food and changes. So this is going to be kind of a broad historical view of both food and medicine. Credit for portions of this segment I want to give to a Midwestern doc over on Substack. If you have not ever checked out Substack, substack.com, you can just make an account and then you can choose to follow. There's a lot of people on Substack who are now writing. There's a plethora of information available to you on all kinds of different topics. And I just recently heard from Badlands that they're actually doing podcasting now on Substack, which is also pretty interesting. Highly recommend following, though, a Midwestern doc, DOC, on Substack. So there was this pivotal shift after World War I when the industrial capacity to create phosphate explosives was repurposed to create phosphate fertilizers. The scientific consensus shifted to available nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in the soil as primary plant nutrition, which was dismissing all the micronutrients and minerals, resulting in over-farmed soil becoming nutritionally depleted. Earl Butt, who was Nixon's Secretary of Agriculture, also decided that America needed to shift from small family farms to large single crop operations. Major agribusiness took over the farming sector, and farming subsidies led to really cheap corn. This led to the rise of high fructose corn syrup hitting the market in 1977. Simultaneously, the Senate's Select Committee on Nutrition released dietary goals for the United States, targeting fat, cholesterol, and salt. And so as a kid, there's a couple of examples that I can remember. You know, when I was a younger kid, we cooked, I remember, you know, if you made bacon, you took that bacon grease and you put it in a coffee can that was empty on the counter and let that grease cool off, and then put the little plastic lid back on the coffee can. And then when you were frying eggs or, you know, frying up some potatoes or anything, you just took a hunk out of that bacon grease can and threw it in. We put butter and beef tallow. I mean, back then, McDonald's French fries were cooked in beef tallow, and it was better. I have heard Steak and Shake in all locations across the country are now using beef tallow, which is, you know, we're moving in the right direction. So fat, cholesterol, and salt were the targets. So they didn't want you to eat red meat. They didn't want you to eat butter or beef tallow or any of those things. And I remember my grandmother, as I got older, when I was about, I don't know, young teenager, my grandmother came to live with us because her health was failing. And she's smoking like a chimney, has, constructive or COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Let me try to make words. So she's smoking on oxygen, but That's not why she had, a cardiac event. It was the eggs that, the cholesterol in the eggs. So she had this weird little carton of some kind of fake egg whites in the fridge. I don't know. They were horrible. And then fake salt, because that's what was causing her heart disease. Not the fact that she was smoking and this, the smoking, what does that actually do? Well, it inflames the interior lining of the arteries. We're going to get into that in another episode. But anyway, stay away from those eggs and the salt, because that's bad. Side note, statins were introduced in the 1980s to address cholesterol. We're going to address statins. We're going to do a whole episode on statins. So that'll be coming up. Subsidized corn led to high fructose corn syrup processed food boom. The 1977 dietary goals and the 1980 dietary guidelines both pushed complex carbohydrates. The tobacco industry had suffered numerous devastating court defeats in the 1980s, so they decided to diversify by investing in the processed food industry. The scientists who made cigarettes so addictive now directed their efforts to processed food. David Kessler, who was a former FDA commissioner known for his crusade against the tobacco industry, in his book, The End of Overeating, shares that industry heads admitted to him that they deliberately engineered their foods to be addictive. What sort of additives were developed by these crazy scientists to make food more addictive? Then we saw the gene revolution, which caused our food supply to be flooded with experimental genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. They require more Roundup or glyphosate to grow. We're going to cover glyphosate in greater detail in a future episode. GMOs can be patented and are aggressively used to monopolize agriculture. For example, many GMO crops don't produce seeds. So it requires that the farmers then go and purchase seed every year to plant the crops. Now we're going to shift over to an overview of medicine. So, if one wishes for good health, one must first ask oneself if he's ready to do away with the reasons for his illness. Only then is it possible to help him. And I think the difficulty with this that I can see is that like I was saying before, we're in this allopathic medicine model. As we get into the history of medicine, it'll be clearer, but it seems like many patients that I see are not interested in trying to adjust their diet, or hey, maybe if you controlled your blood sugar a little better, you wouldn't have this chronic pain or live with all this chronic inflammation, which is causing your chronic pain. They just want a pill or an injection or some intervention. And I can't really blame the patients, because we've trained them, we as healthcare providers, to expect that. So I think as healthcare providers, we have a responsibility to start teaching people to be responsible and have accountability for their own well-being. And then I think as patients, as consumers, we need to demand it. We need to demand our healthcare providers help cure us, not just help manage our disease. So I got to do some tech stuff here for a sec. And I got to do this. Wait a minute. See? Your first podcast will be bad. Here's me laying down my ego. So there we go. So in 1903, John D. Rockefeller founded the General Education Board. In partnership with Andrew Carnegie Foundation, they gave billions to schools. At the turn of the century, Rockefeller controlled 90% of petroleum through his ownership of Standard Oil. Later, it was split into Mobil, Chevron, and Exxon. Concurrently, the science world became very excited about petrochemicals. At the same time, most essential vitamins were being discovered: B1, B12, biotin, vitamin C, vitamin A, and vitamin D. Simple vitamin remedies were curing conditions caused by these deficiencies, like scurvy and rickets. Almost half of the medical colleges and the doctors were practicing holistic medicine. So Rockefeller, looking to monopolize multiple industries at once, medicines and vitamins, petroleum-based medicine, he purchased the German pharmaceutical company IG Farben. So just some examples of petroleum-based medications. It's kind of a strange concept, isn't it? Petroleum-based medicines? What? Let's look at a couple. Aspirin is also known as salicylic acid, and it is synthesized from phenol, a petroleum product. Ibuprofen, otherwise known as Motrin, is made from propylene, a derivative of petroleum. For me, a perioperative nurse, anesthetics such as halothane, isoflurane, and sevoflurane are synthesized from hydrocarbons obtained from petroleum. And synthetic vitamins A, D, and E are also produced using petrochemicals. Finally, steroids have components derived from petroleum. So Carnegie hires this guy named Abraham Flexner, who submitted the Flexner Report to Congress in 1910. The report, modeled after German medical education, called for standardization of medical training and for legislation to codify it. It defined allopathic medicine, a science-based approach using drugs, medicine, and surgery to treat disease. Let's do that again. Allopathic medicine is defined as a science-based approach using drugs, medication, and surgery to treat disease. So how's that German medicine model working for us, folks? Rockefeller and Carnegie started funding medical schools on the strict condition that they only taught allopathic medicine. These huge grants dismantled curriculums, removing natural treatments and nutrition. That's why you hear doctors all over the place talking about the fact that they got no training in nutrition. You can thank Rockefeller and Carnegie and the allopathic medicine model. Training lengthened, and that produced more specialists over generalists. That's why you go to your primary care doctor and your knee hurts, and your primary doctor sends you to another doctor, who sends you to another doctor, who sends you to another doctor, because everybody's specialized. Nobody can oversee the care across the board. And it was not long before a pill for every ill became the American medicine mindset. Medicine's focus became treatment over prevention. Today, Big Pharma continues to make large donations in exchange for teaching new medical students or students in medical schools about patented drugs. Now, clearly, standardizing medical education is a positive reform, but making preventative modalities illegitimate has not been. And, you know, when you think about what medicine might have looked like before this allopathic model was kind of put into place, you know, nutrition was important in prevention, and vitamins replacing nutritional deficiencies were actually curing some diseases. And that all got nixed, and it became, you know, some fringe thing, some hippie thing, real doctors, you know, dismissing. So, you know, I think the answer, you know, it's one of those life kind of lessons as you get older, like me, that you kind of figure out that somewhere in the middle is usually where the truth lies. So, you know, maybe the combination, which is what we're seeing with integrative medicine, where you're combining the two, might be the future. So I have to do some more technical stuff here. So give me just a sec. I figure this out. I promise I'm going to get better at this. I had too many things to load, and so I have to delete and load. Nope, that's not the one. That one. That's the one I want. Good grief. I promise I'm going to get better at this. So, on February 13th. Nope, that's not the right one. Give me oh my gosh. Okay, so this is bad. This is bad. This is where we all go back to that quote at the beginning that I put up, where I said, like, get rid of your ego and just do the first one. And it's the wrong one. All right, I'm just going to get rid of it. So, on February 13th, President Trump issued an executive order establishing the Maha Commission. It is chaired by Bobby Kennedy, the HHS secretary, and includes the secretaries from Agriculture, Housing and Urban Development, Education, the Veterans Affairs, the EPA, the Office of Management and Budget, the FDA, the CDC, the National Institutes of Health, and the National Economic Council. Within 100 days, which puts us at May 24th, they are tasked with submitting to the president the following: identifying childhood chronic disease in America compared to other countries, assessing the threat of medication, food ingredients, chemicals, and other exposures to chronic inflammation and other disease in children, assess the threat specifically of SSRIs, which are a classification of antidepressants, and that stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, as well as antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, stimulants, and interestingly, weight loss drugs. Report on best practices for preventing childhood health issues through proper nutrition and lifestyle. By August, the commission will submit a strategy which will restructure the federal government response to the healthcare crisis. And already we are seeing MAHA in action. So I'm going to do this a little better. So here we go.
We told them that we wanted the dyes out of the food. The science on the dyes is so overwhelming. They're making products now in this country that have the dyes in them, like Fruit Loops, for example. And you buy the same product in Canada and it doesn't have the dyes. You buy the same product in Europe and it doesn't have the dyes. So there are a lot of ingredients, and one of the things that we're doing is we've launched a review of the GRAS standards, and we're going to get rid of the GRAS standards for most products. The GRAS standards is a standard that was adopted in 1958. It was adopted because when FDA was created to regulate food, there were foods that were generally recognized as safe, GRAS, generally recognized as safe, like flour, like dairy, like eggs. And they didn't want to make companies test those products, so they created that designation. But that designation was expanded by an industry that began taking advantage of it so that any new chemical that they want to add to our food is generally recognized as safe and gets no review. Yeah. That's why we have 10,000 ingredients in our food in this country. In Europe, they only have 400. And we have the worst chronic disease burden of any country in the world. So we are going to get rid of the GRAS standards for new products. We're going to go back and review all of these old ingredients to make sure that they are safe. And we're going to encourage these companies to get rid of them as quickly as possible.
10,000? Whew. So since 1997, the FDA shifted to a voluntary notification system. So companies can conduct their own additive safety assessments with minimal oversight. And our food is more addictive. And we just get sicker and sicker and sicker. And it's affecting younger and younger and younger. Oof. And then Bobby also did this.
Hi, this is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. As Secretary of Health and Human Services, one of the agencies that I oversee is the Food and Drug Administration. The FDA is responsible for making sure that the food and medicine that Americans put into their body is safe. That's important for everyone, but especially for our children, because they're the most vulnerable, and the most vulnerable of all are our babies. If there's one food that must be safe beyond any doubt, it's infant formula. Mothers who cannot or choose not to breastfeed need to have absolute confidence that their infant formula is ideal for their babies and have many options to choose from. Parents and others who rely on infant formula should know what's in these products and how consuming them may impact their child's health. That's why I'm directing the FDA to launch Operation Stork Speed. Amongst many things, it will study infant formula to inform updates in federal guidelines. Let me tell you why we're doing this. You see, the science of human nutrition has progressed since current guidelines were put in place in 1998. So we're going to evaluate all the common ingredients from corn syrup solids to seed oils to make sure that they meet the needs of our little ones. Some things we know are bad, like heavy metals, so we're going to increase the frequency of testing to make sure that no child drinks contaminated formula. I met with the CEOs of all the top infant formula manufacturers a couple of days ago, and they're united in support of this initiative. They are ready to make whatever changes are needed based upon the current evidence, because no one wants our children to be sick. We all want our children to grow and flourish from the moment they're born. Make America Healthy Again is something that can unite all Americans. And that's what Operation Stork Speed is all about. We're going to make American infant formula the gold standard for the world.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
I don't know about you guys, but that makes me so happy. So happy. So happy. So this is one of the best-selling baby formulas in America. And this is the ingredients list. Non-fat milk, lactose, safflower oil, that's a seed oil, whey protein concentrate, soy oil, that's a seed oil, coconut oil, a good oil, but it's right there on the top of the ingredients list. Galacto-oligosaccharides, and then less than 2% of more oils, some chemicals, and some chemicals, and some chemicals. Oh, there's a vitamin. See a couple vitamins in here. This is infant formula, one of the number one selling infant formulas in our country. And we wonder why our children have fatty liver disease by the time they're adolescents. So we have much work to do. We will be doing seed oils and more in depth in upcoming episodes. And so this brings us to the end of this very first episode, my very first podcast. Make that podcast, baby. So this has been a journey into something brand new for me, and it's quite foreign. So I hope to improve as we continue, and I would really appreciate it if you would continue to journey with me. If you are on Rumble, please hit that thumbs up button. If you are just watching on Rumble and don't have an account, you can't. Make an account. Hit that thumbs up. That's how I get more eyes on. That's how I move up in the algorithms, and that's how maybe, we can be more successful at this. Otherwise, just kind of like, follow, and most importantly, please just share this. Share this with your friends and family. If you learned something, anything today, share this with someone else, because maybe they will too. And if we keep, what's that saying? The rising tide lifts all boats. So let's start lifting some boats, okay? And I'll see you on the next episode of Doses of Deception. Thanks so much for joining me. Bye.